All right, Lawrence, Kansas is where we're turning the focus of this video. Blake, things are in shambles over there in Bill Self's kingdoms. The Kansas Jayhawks and the most recent AP poll have dropped out for the first time since February of 2021. That amounts to 80 weeks in total. Very unprecedented and uncharted waters for Bill Self. He's had a tremendous amount of success there. Obviously, the national championship just a couple of years back usually is always consistently in the mix and in the conversation around this time of year as we head into March. But Blake, this is a team that's kind of getting left in the rearview mirror where things are. They've been rattling off bad performance after bad performance, and it's started to reflect in the rankings now. They've lost that number next to their name. This is a team as well that was number one in the preseason. It's just been a complete failure on all ends. It's a really poorly constructed roster. We've talked about it briefly before, but let's really dig into the roots here and figure out what Mr. Self's problem is, because this roster, man, it just hasn't clicked the way anybody, including myself, thought it would.
You said it best, though. That roster construction is piss poor. If you dive into that team, like KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson, Flory Badunga, those three is your go-to bigs. I feel like is a joke itself. Not really just because they're not bad players in any way. They just have no floor spacing. And when they ran that three big lineup, I think it was against Utah. I mean, that itself is just a joke, to be honest with you. It just seems like Bill Self, this Kansas team is checked out already. They just don't seem as locked in as they were early in the season. They got to win against Duke, Michigan State, North Carolina when they were ranked ninth in the country early in the season. And then I just feel like after that Creighton loss, it kind of rattled them, honestly, earlier in the season. Then they lost on the road to Missouri. Then you go down a little. They lost to West Virginia on New Year's Eve at West Virginia. Or no, it was at Kansas.
Allen Fieldhouse.
Yeah, my bad. They got boat raced to Iowa State. Lost to Houston in a game which, to be honest with you, should have never went to overtime. Should have never been.
They completely choked that game. They lost a 6-point lead twice.
That was insane to watch. And then they lose on the road to Baylor, which Baylor has been really underwhelming this season, and they've been a joke themselves. That's a discussion for a whole nother day. Utah, they've been really, really bad this year, and Kansas loses that game. So that itself is a joke. And then they lose to BYU in a game that wasn't even close in any way, 91-57. So it's just pathetic to see that happen.
Yeah, that Baylor loss, too, you mentioned it. They were up by 20 in that game, and they completely let go and just lost that game. That was really a terrible one for them because that Baylor team has not lived up to the expectations that many had set out for them. That team's another disappointment that we'll probably get into in a later video. But another thing, too, you mentioned the three big man lineup when they were rolling that out against BYU. I mean, that's just not playing modern basketball, man. You cannot send out three big dudes in Hunter Dickinson, KJ Adams, and Flory Badunga. I get that you want to have that pairing of Hunter Dickinson alongside Badunga because they have really looked at times like they're clicking. But trying to force KJ Adams into that logjam, it just doesn't make sense to me. And, I mean, none of those guys are really perimeter-based scorers either, which is a problem when it comes to modern basketball because you want your big guys to be able to stretch the floor a little bit. I mean, Dickinson's shown flashes of it at times, but not consistently, and Flory's still developing. KJ Adams has always been more of an interior kind of guy. It just doesn't make sense, man. And then you factor in things like, Rylan Griffin, the Bama transfer. There were high expectations for him. I mean, he was a key piece to the Final Four team that Alabama had, and he just hasn't really done much of anything for them. A.J. Storr as well. That was a prize get for them in the portal. He's just been inefficient at times. Really the only guy you could rely on for the transfer group of that team, Zeke Mayo. I mean, he's been good at times. He's somewhat consistent, but another part of this, and I don't want to crush this guy by any means, but when DeJuan Harris has been the orchestrator of your offense for this long, at some point, like, you just gotta close the door
You got
on
to
that
cut the ties
chapter.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
because I get the playmaking he brings. He's not a bad defender either, but that brother is broke when it comes to the
yeah,
offensive side of the ball. I don't know if you agree with me on that, but I feel like that's an underrated part to this and nobody's talking about. DeJuan Harris cannot be the floor general of a roster in this just climate of college basketball. At least I feel.
yeah, I agree with you for sure. And it doesn't help that Hunter Dickinson is statistically having his worst season in his college career so far. He's shooting 22% from three, and he hadn't shot under like 33% from three, I don't think, ever pre Kansas era this year. So I don't understand his reasoning to leave a good situation at where he was before, with that being Michigan. Uh, it helped out Michigan a ton. I mean, they got Golden and Wolf running the show there now, and they're top 25 in the nation and winning big games. So
Finally got rid of
uh,
Jawan Howard too. That was really
that's
important.
true. That's true. That's a big piece in all of that puzzle that is getting put together. But yeah, it's just piss poor roster construction. AJ Store being a disappointment, obviously, is very detrimental to that Kansas team because he was thought to be like the go-to guy. I'm assuming he was thought to be between like him and Dickinson because of just how good they were like pre-Kansas. Like they were so good before they got to Kansas. AJ Store looked unbelievable when I watched him play last year. Hunter Dickinson has always been a really good college player since he came into the league, really. DeJuan Harris, I mean, like these guys aren't bad ball players. They just I don't think they all fit together, and I mean that's really being shown this year with just how bad they played.
The thing that confuses you too when you look at this team, like the pieces are there, it seems on paper, and I mean they have
Mm-hmm.
some resume wins to back it up. I mean they beat Duke. Granted, it was in November, but I mean that was a good win for them to get under their belt. They beat Michigan State in the Champions Classic. That was kind of before Izzo really had them rolling too. They blew out Iowa State, but that was also without Milan Momcilovic, so you got to kind of put an asterisk next to that one. He's a big part of what they do, and then they've got the good wins, but then there's just, like we mentioned already, so many losses that just don't make sense. I mean, dropping
Yeah.
games to West Virginia and Allen Fieldhouse when that was the first time West Virginia had won there, and I think maybe ever. Like, it was
Mm-hmm.
something crazy. And then they had Houston on the ropes multiple times, too, in that game. In regulation and overtime, they let go of the rope twice. They had a 6-point lead both times. I mean, it's just a team that really feels like they're letting go of the rope. And Bill Self, too. I mean, this is something we got to talk about. He is an outstanding coach. I mean, at this point in his career, I wouldn't be surprised. This is me going full conspiracy Tackett mode here, but I wouldn't be surprised if he just said, "You know what? What else do I have to prove here?" It feels like this thing has been kind of stale the last couple of years because this isn't the first group of his that's had expectations and hasn't really delivered. Last year's team, they had expectations on him as well, and they went out in round two. So
Yeah.
this is starting to become a trend where almost kind of like a situation with Calipari at Kentucky where you start to wonder if it's run its course. And I mean, he's shown signs of things too in the media, like that bizarre quote from a couple games back where he was asked about his alma mater, Oklahoma State, and how he was offered the job there. And he basically straight up, without saying, like, yeah, I was thinking about it, he just said, I did talk to them, not necessarily about hiring me, but about what needs to happen for them to compete in this league. But the part that I stayed to hold up in Stillwater, that was inaccurate. Like, I don't understand why you go out and say that you were openly talking to a league opponent. Like, I get that it was your alma mater and whatnot. That's always going to hold a special place in your heart. But still, like, what are we doing? I mean,
Especially
this,
with how bad that Kansas team has been lately. Like in
yeah,
conference play, they've completely like shot themselves in the foot. In their foot, they're 10-7 in conference play, and they only lost two non-conference games before that, and they're like actually looking like a competent team. And then you get Bill Self saying that stuff publicly about a in conference rival. Like, just come on, man. Like, you can't be doing that. Even as a Hall of Fame coach, you got some status, I guess, because like you've proven your worth. But even then, I don't know the reasoning. I don't get the point behind publicly saying that.
It does more harm than good, just to
Yeah,
sum it all up briefly. And like, it just gives the impression that he's a guy that's like 1 foot out the door at this point. Like,
hey, he's checked
why?
out.
Yeah, why are you talking about other jobs and stuff? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. This team, they're trending down at the worst time of year. They've
Hmm.
got to play on Saturday. They're going to be playing Texas Tech. They get the home court in that one. But then down the stretch, they've got to go to Houston, and they're also going to host Arizona. I mean, Blake, if things don't get turned around quick, I know that Allen Fieldhouse is a really tough place to win at. So having 2 out of your last 3 at home, very beneficial. But with this team playing the way that they are right now, it's not insane to say this team could finish the league play 0-3 heading into the Big 12
No,
tournament.
that's not crazy at all, especially if the teams are playing at Arizona or at home against Arizona. That's a scary game to top the season off. At Houston, that could get scary, especially with just how poorly this Kansas team has been trending since the last time that Houston and Kansas played, and then Texas Tech, a team that's going to be hungry after that loss against, or after that game they just had against Iowa State. So, yeah, this is definitely going to be cinema, I think, down the stretch. As a college basketball fan, and maybe even as a Kansas fan, because I mean, like you definitely want to see this team improve because with March coming up and just how piss poor they played lately, like you struggle against Colorado. Granted, like no road game is easy, but Colorado is awful this season. Like you shouldn't be struggling with that team as a team that comes into the season as a number 1 ranked team in the country. Like, are you serious right now? Like,
Yeah, you mentioned that this could be cinema for Kansas down the stretch. I'll put it in this term of cinema. It's going to be a horror cinema for Jayhawks fan.
yeah,
Kind
yeah,
of like Michael Myers, the boogeyman. He's running you down. You've got
yeah.
Texas Tech, Houston, and Arizona staring at you down the stretch here. I mean, God, this could get ugly if you're Kansas. If now Allen Fieldhouse, I won't bet against them when they're playing there because those fans get
Hmm.
down. They're obviously going to be backing their team 100%. And there's talent. Like, this isn't a matter of not having talent. It's just the fact that they can't put it together and they haven't been
Hmm.
cohesive at all. And right now, bracketology, most metrics have them around a 6 seed range. I mean, that's a really bizarre thing to see Kansas sitting at.
Yeah.
Give a little bit of a confidence meter here to kind of top this thing off. Going down the stretch, these 3 games, how confident are you that they can come out of this? Maybe not winning some of these games, but at least looking respectable and like a team that you can maybe have a little bit of optimism for heading into postseason play if you're a Kansas fan.
If I'm doing it out of 10, I'm sitting at like a 4 just because of how bad, like, they haven't really shown any signs whatsoever of improving down the stretch. They've gotten worse, if anything. Like, they started off the season so hot. They were on a, what was it, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 game win streak to start off the season. And that included games against Michigan State, who's now one of the hottest teams in America, really. They had a win against, at the time, top 10 North Carolina. And they also had a win against the now number 2 team in the country, Duke. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
they have the talent. It just, I think once one bad loss happened, I really think it snowballed. And these guys apparently haven't gotten past it because like those 2 road games they had in the stretch at Creighton and Missouri, like mid-season, I feel like that did a lot of damage just to that team, really, because like since that 2 game stretch, they've been really like average. And then like when you're talking later stretch, like Houston's a great team. I think they got Final Four aspirations, but they had Houston, like they were leading that game, and then they choked that game. So they're really shooting themselves in the foot down the stretch.
Yeah, I'll put my confidence rating at like a cool 6, and that's mainly because of the fact that that home crowd. I mean, it's the best environment, one of the best environments in college basketball, and it's just hard to bet against a team that's playing there. And I definitely think, looking at Texas Tech, Houston and Arizona down the stretch, the most winnable game, if you're looking at this, is probably Arizona, in my
It's
opinion.
got to be Arizona just
Yeah.
because of how bad offensively they can be. Like if you have Caleb Love shooting like
If Caleb
2 for
Love does Caleb
13
Love
or something,
things, to
yeah.
put
If
put
he
it simply.
struggles, then if he struggles, then that team just goes down a whole nother notch. If he's not hitting a half court shot to save the team like he did that one night against Iowa State, then it might not be pretty for
Yeah,
Arizona, but
and
we'll see, I guess.
I can confidently say they're not going into Houston next Monday and winning. I mean,
No,
I'm sorry, Houston's playing as good a basketball as any team in the country. Like that just isn't going to happen. I don't see it. I think that Houston is so far above them. And then you look at the Big 12 standings; they're sitting right now at sixth behind
mhm.
BYU. So they're kind of playing themselves out of that double bye territory when it comes to the Big 12 tournament. And I think this is going to be back-to-back years of them finishing outside the top five in their league, which is really strange to see for a Bill Self-led program. Now, Blake, just walk with me here. I mentioned my conspiracy earlier. Bill Self just saying, you know what, I don't have anything left to prove. I've had some heart issues in the last couple of years. Health has kind of been in question. Obviously, he's doing fine now. I don't want to speculate on anything, but just still. And then you factor in the quote with Oklahoma State. Like, is it really absurd to say, you know what, maybe Bill Self just calls it quits here? I think that it might. I'm not saying that it's outright going to happen, but I'm just saying I won't be shocked if we see something like that unfold.
If you asked me at the start of the season if Bill Self was retiring or leaving Kansas after the season, I'd call you crazy. But I mean, as we sit here on February 25th today, I don't think it's out of pocket to say he could be leaning towards like finding new opportunities at like a different college or just flat out retiring because just like it hasn't gone like super pretty so far there at Kansas the past couple of years. Like you said earlier in this episode, it's a lot like Calipari's ending at Kentucky. I don't know how Kansas fans feel towards Self right now, but I mean, me personally, if I was a Kansas junkie, then I'd be not super happy with like what he's put together with this team. He went for like highly ranked transfers instead of fit, and I think that was a huge downfall in their season.
I wouldn't be thrilled at all if I'm a Kansas fan going down the stretch here, to put it bluntly. And I hope they turn it around for Bill Self's sake because he's a very likable guy. He's a winner, all class. He's one of the best coaches in the game. I don't want to send him off into retirement prematurely or anything. It just has the kind of vibes of somebody that may be checked out. But we'll see
Yeah,
if Kansas turns it around. I'm not feeling super confident in it, but hey, Rock Chalk Nation, I'm wishing you the best. We'll see. Anything can happen in March. We've seen it
that's
before.
true.